Welcome to the Handed Down Kitchen, where we bring antique recipes out of the past and back into the kitchen. On this Good Friday, we're going to disrupt our schedule for an Easter special, a 1940s recipe for a traditional Easter treat, hot cross buns made the old-fashioned way with spiced dough and pastry crosses. We found this recipe in our copy of the Manual for Modern Cookery, which was published in 1943. We'll be using two recipes from it, the first to make the buns and the second for the pastry. And to make them, you'll need the following ingredients. For the buns, you'll need 1/4 teaspoon each of ground ginger and cinnamon and half a teaspoonful of salt, 1½ ounces, that's 42 grams of raisins, half a pound, that's 227 grams of plain flour, half an ounce, that's 14 grams of fresh yeast, 1 ounce, that's 28 grams of sugar, about 3/4 cupful of warm milk, 1½ ounces, that's 42 grams of fat, we've used butter, and 1 large egg. And for the pastry crosses, you'll need 2 ounces, that's 57 grams of plain flour, 1 ounce, that's 28 grams altogether of a mix of margarine and lard, a pinch of salt, and a little cold water. You can make your pastry first if you prefer. We decided to make it later as we waited for our dough to rise. So the first thing we did was to make the spiced dough. In a large bowl, mix together the flour, salt and spices, and all but 1 teaspoonful of the sugar. Once that's all well mixed, rub in the fat. The recipe leaves it up to you to decide what fat you use. We used cold butter cut into cubes, but you can just as well use margarine. Then add in the raisins. In a small bowl, cream together the yeast with the remaining sugar. If you're using fresh yeast like we are, after a minute or so it will become liquid. You can always use dried yeast instead, just use half the amount. In another bowl, beat up your egg. It's best to use a large egg so that you can reserve a little to brush over the tops of the buns before baking. So take some of the beaten egg out for brushing, and then to the rest of the egg, pour in the yeast. Mix this in until it's fully combined, and then add in half of your warm milk. Make a well in the flour and pour the egg mixture in. Mix just a little to combine and then place somewhere warm to sponge through. Ours took about half an hour. Add in the rest of your warm milk and then mix and knead your dough to a light consistency before putting it somewhere warm to rise until it's doubled in size. Hot cross buns have been eaten at Easter for centuries. They mark the end of Lent and are traditionally baked on or just before Good Friday in Britain. We live in London, and at this time of year 200 or so years ago, town criers would walk through the streets calling people to come out of their homes to fetch their buns, shouting, "Good Friday comes this month, the old woman runs, with 1 or 2 a penny hot cross buns." Half an hour later, our dough has doubled in size. Now it's time to form it into buns. Knead it again just a little and then transfer onto a well-floured board. We're now going to roll it out, and the recipe doesn't say how thickly or thinly to roll the dough. We rolled ours to about 1/2 inch thick. Then cut it into rounds. Ours were quite small, about 3 by 3 inches, and out of this we got 10 buns. If you want larger buns, you'll get about 4 or 5 out of this recipe. Put these onto a greased baking tray and then take them away to prove in the same warm place. We left ours for another half an hour, and while we did, we got on with making the short crust pastry crosses. To make the pastry, we used one of the 2 recipes for short pastry in the same book. Start by mixing the flour and salt in a basin. Then rub in the 2 fats, the lard and margarine. You'll want even amounts of these. Rub this in with your fingertips until they're like breadcrumbs. Add in just a little water and mix to a stiff consistency. We didn't need that much pastry, so we quartered the amounts given in this book. If you've made a pie or a tart recently and you have some trimmings hanging around, you can always use those instead rather than making pastry from scratch. We're going to reuse the floured surface we rolled the dough onto for our pastry. So turn this out and roll it quite thinly into an oblong. Then cut your pastry into long, thin strips. These days the crosses on top of hot cross buns are usually made using a mix of water and flour, but they were originally made of short crust pastry. Bring your buns back and brush them over with the egg. Then lay the strips of pastry over them in a cross, trimming off any excess. Our local bakery, where we get our fresh yeast from, is well known for its hot cross buns. For a whole week at this time of year, you can smell them baking from 5 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon from halfway down the road. It's absolutely beautiful. They're a popular bakery, always busy, but on Good Friday the queue of customers comes out the door, down the road and round the corner. Brush these over lightly with whatever egg you have left and then bake at 200 degrees Celsius or 180 fan until nicely golden. About 10 minutes later, ours had filled the room with the most gorgeous smell and were ready. And of course, these are best served fresh out of the oven while still hot with butter, so we got stuck in straight away. Traditional golden 1940s hot cross buns with pastry crosses, lightly spiced and perfect for Easter. We hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please leave us a like, and if you'd like to see us recreate more antique recipes, be sure to subscribe to our channel. You can also find full instructions for this recipe and many more on our website, linked in the description box below.